Hi, I'm Mark Rossano, founder and CEO of C6 Capital Holdings, coming to you from Primary Vision Network. So we're back with our favorite day, the Primary Vision Frac Spread count. We took last week off. The count did go out, but we obviously didn't do a show. So if you could please like, share, subscribe. For the new year, trying to grow this and make it a bit bigger, just so we can keep this going and keep all the great information coming out. So today we're going to keep it a little bit shorter. We're going to focus pretty much all on commodities. We're going to touch on obviously crude, what's happening with the liquids market, Kazakhstan and Libya. And then we're also going to touch briefly on what's happening in the ag space. And we're going to try to do a little less econ data here and keep that with the econ show, try to drum up some of those numbers and keep things moving in the positive direction. So without further ado, the Primary Vision Frac Spread count came in at 244. So that's an increase of 10. The previous week was 234. And it's happening in a very steady rate, because you have to look at post-holiday and pre-holiday. So when you look at what happens during that slowdown, we went from about 272 down to 234 at the low point, and now we're going to see an incremental increase, but it's going to ramp up. So the first increase was 10, the next one's going to be anywhere between 12 and 17, just because now we're past the holiday slowdown, everything's going to get back to work. We have budgets that have been picked back up, where we expect to see those budgets increase through Q1 and Q2, and that's going to, again, incentivize additional capacity. Now, we are starting to see a little bit more talk on refracs, and that's something that we think is more of a Q2 event, but we're starting to see some work, just for some low-hanging fruit, just some the vintage 2018, 2019 drilled. And there's more to it than just when was the well drilled, when was the well completed. It's more about how, because based on how it was done, it will lend itself to what, based on the pressure, the rock, a lot of things that go into it outside of just, it was drilled and completed in 2019, so hence it can be refracked. There's a lot of things that go into it, but based on the recipe that was used, the process that was used, we're coming into, and this will provide a nice little bump for some of the production that we expect to see on an increasing basis. Now, the next question is going to be, when do we get over 300 spreads? And I think that's more of a March event. That's not so much, it could happen in February. I'm not saying it can. It's just more of a March, April, and it's really weather related. It's labor related. It's shortage in equipment. And we have a report that came out looking at horsepower by basin and by pumper. And I recommend you reaching out, asking about it, just because it's I believe it's 3,000 for the report. I think it just gives you an idea of what is the horsepower available in that basin, but not only just available, but what is working, what is available, and then you get an idea of what is that spread. Are we looking at 15 spreads additional in the Permian? Because right now the Permian's at 140. Or do we only have an extra 7 spreads being marketed, or do we have 15, or do we have 0? And we're coming up to this point now. The Permian's still running hot in comparison to previous years. Texas, Louisiana had a nice increase. Western Gulf. Essentially, we do think that the liquids is going to continue to be a bright spot. Now, obviously, there's been a slowdown in exports, and that's really based on the Panama Canal. We had Saudi Arabia cut the LPG pricing, or propane butane pricing, which will hit a little bit on our demand. But again, we do see a lot of support for the NGL basket as we go through all of 2022 and beyond. So that's something that's going to be a big component of what we talk about, including our models that we have on NGLs and LNG. So now when we look at rig count took a little bit of a breather. We had a small increase when you look just on the offshore side. So oil had an increase of 1, gas had an increase of 1. But when you look at directional, So directional rigs went up by 3, horizontal went up by 2, and vertical went down by 3. So again, this is just we're seeing this DUC increase because that's the focus right now. Make sure that there is enough drilled but uncompleted wells, which is just rigs that have come through, finish this well so that the frac spreads can come up and obviously complete it. So that's where we're going to see over the next Q1 is really just rigs still running higher than where spreads are, replenishing where some of this inventory has been drawn down, just so we can have a fairly robust, not only Q2, but also Q3. So now when we look at Montbell View, just to give you an idea of where the frac spread is. So this is looking at the overall basket. You can see we're starting off the year very strong. We see it really kind of going sideways. We don't see too much pressure up or down in the near term. Right here, we think it's very comfortable. There's enough demand that's going to continue to be robust. And now as we look at propane, just as we talk about in the EIA show, it's going to come down to what is the weather doing? How are things going? Where's plastic demand, which we know is going to be robust. So it's going to come down to the breakdown of where are exports and where is heating demand. And that's going to be kind of that bellwether of how much stronger do we get, which is why we think based on exports coming under a bit of pressure, it'll kind of keep us in this realm. Now, when we turn to what is happening in Kazakhstan, so Russia has been flying in troops. They've engaged with some entities that are liberation units. They're obviously being deemed as terrorists by the Kazakhstan government. So there have been actually some fairly intense fighting, not just people running around with, I know that I think there was a picture of a gentleman with a sledgehammer. You're talking about some skilled, some very a bit more deadly meetings of both the protesters, or as they're claiming them, terrorists, versus not only the Kazakhstan army, but also what is coming from Belarus right now so far, and the Russia. Now, one of the things that is interesting is the terrorist or group or the Liberation Army is saying that they will fight the Kazakhstan government as well as anyone that comes in to support them. So this is, I don't want to say this is turning into Syria because it's not, but it's something where it's not just going to go away. And the reason why we say that with pretty strong confidence is because this has been bubbling up. There's been a lot of pressure. There's a lot of political unrest. There's a lot of anger towards not only just the government, but also their policies. So this is not just, well, LPG prices went up, so hence I'm angry. So if LPG prices go down, all these people go home. That's not how this is going to work. And we did a deep dive on that in segment 1 of the Econ show. But now turning this back to oil, so they've halted. There hasn't been a full halt to oil production, but there has been some impact at the Tengiz field, which saw some decline. Right now, all 3 refiners are operating stable, normal, with fully supplied oil. So in terms of products, they're fine. But this is just looking at how much crude that they were producing, which was just over 1.7 million barrels a day. We've heard reports from anywhere that they're currently at about 1.45 to about 1.6. We think it's going to be closer to about 1.5, split the difference based on where it is. But right now, it's just it's more of an impact because they can't get truck drivers, and the roads have been deemed unsafe, which is creating that impact. So it's not really at the field level; it's just getting it from the tank at the field into a truck into the collection point. Now, when we shift to Libya, so Libya this is just showing you where they were and how they've been pretty consistent between about 1.1 to 1.2. The oil minister said that they're currently at about 730,000 barrels. We've had people telling us that they're anywhere between 730 to about 800. Right now, just based on where things are, it can flare up. So a spread of 70,000 barrels a day, is just a matter of, is this pipeline now secure? Did it go off? So it's really a moving target based on where things are. We based on what is available at the coast for export, we should see exports be able to hold close to about 1 million barrels a day this month. But then as we go into February, if they can't increase this, we will see exports drop and come closer to about 860,000 barrels a day. But again, they're hoping to clear some of these issues. Whether or not they can get a election together by the end of this month is obviously highly unlikely. So the question will be, when does the election get held, if at all, because that is a very big point of strife between everyone. Now, when we look at what has happened from OPEC, as we talked about in the EIA show and the Econ show, they've increased the production levels by 400,000. But one of the things that we have been talking about was it's very important to look at what is happening with the Middle East OSPs, the official selling price. So you can see that there's been a drop. That blue line is showing you where things are from coming out of Saudi Arabia for Arab Light going into Asia. So Asia saw the biggest decline, anywhere between $1 and $1.50, depending on the grade. Europe was fairly flat, small decline of 30 to 40 cents, 50 cents at the highest. US and Med were fairly flat. So you can see that they're starting to get more aggressive into Asia. As we were saying, that we did get a big increase in floating storage in the Middle East coming into the end of December. That they tried to get that through. Now we're starting to see a big increase in West Africa again, and that's really because China, as we said in the EIA show, you've seen them reduce their import quotas. They've reduced their export quotas, and that's going to become a problem because right now you're seeing them buy less ESPO and SOCOL. They're buying less Angola, and now with OSPs getting a bit more competitive out of the Middle East into Asia, this is going to put additional pressure on Angola, West Africa, and additional pressure on the differentials coming out of Russia because we will see them take a bit more. You can still see it's still at the higher end, but it is coming down. We think that there will be another reduction as we go from February into March. But again, this is something that we'll continue to look at as we get through the remainder of the announcements, because we're still waiting on Kuwait, Iraq, and the UAE. Now, when we shift gears a bit into the agriculture world, so when you look at canola futures, there's a lot of pressure right now on the oil side, which is why we've talked about inflation in India, the pressure that we've seen in Asia, because they do consume a lot of food oils. So we have a lot of bad weather for the world's oilseed growers, which is pushing rapeseed and canola oil prices to fresh records, and again, adding to that food inflation, because this is where we see some of that stickiness on the inflation side. And futures have been on a rapid rise as last year's harvest in Canada and Europe were plagued by droughts, planting cutbacks, cutting global stockpiles to 4-year lows. So again, you're seeing a lot of this pull out of capacity, and then worries are now increasing with supplies of product coming out of South America as the weather remains hot and dry, again reducing soybean prospects, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then you have flooding hitting palm oil farms in Malaysia. Again, it's just one area has a drought, the other area is having floods, which is creating some of these issues. And then Europe, if you remember, has been increasingly reliant on imports especially for oil seeds, as they've reduced or phased out really the type of chemicals that can be used on rapeseed growers, which deters pests, which if you can't use those chemicals, you increase the presence of pests, which decreases your yield, increasing cost and your reliance on the import market. So this is not something that we see improving, especially based on where yields are right now. Now, looking at what is happening in Brazil, as for those that have read some of the research that we've written on the inside side, we've been saying that some of the numbers were a bit too high for Brazil, just because La Nina creates droughts in South America. And here you can see that they're actually taking down their estimates for this calendar year when you're looking at harvest. And the reason why that's important is because this year was actually supposed to be above 2021, and now 21-22 is going to be below. And we think there's more pressure to the downside. And right now they've moved it to about 138 million metric tons. On the flip side, African swine fever was found in a wild boar in Italy, which is going to become a bigger problem because Germany's continued to fight against the increase of swine flu in the region. And then we know that China has had another outbreak. So again, these are some of the issues that we're seeing on the food side. And to give you an idea, when we're looking at Germany, the hog herd shrinks to its smallest since 1996. So you're just getting an idea of just where the pressure is, how it's not going away anytime soon. And then as we go into next week, we're going to talk about China in a bit more detail because we had Shimoa defaulted on what's called a trust product, which is similar to one of the things with the wealth management products. But again, it's just other products that are out there that, and these are the hidden little landmines that we keep talking about, which is a high-yielding short-term instrument, which was pitched to the Chinese as safe and predictable. And property firms have $22 billion US dollars of these due this quarter and $90 billion this year. So again, we have more pressure, we have more defaults coming, and that's why I really don't think China has the ability to come in and stimulate and really save the world, if you will, in terms of introducing new stimulus and capital. So that's what we have for you today. Again, if you have any questions, you can find us in the comments section, or you can reach out to me on Twitter. I apologize, I haven't been as responsive just because we've taken a little bit of a break, but now we're back. I'm going to catch up on comments, and I welcome any new addition to anything that you'd like to know. Or again, you can find me on email. So thanks again for watching. We hope you have a great weekend. I'm off now to go play with my kids in the snow as they've been begging since I left after digging out from the 6 or so inches that fell in my backyard and driveway. So thanks again for watching. I'm Mark Rossano, founder and CEO of C6 Capital Holdings, coming to you from Primary Vision Network.